If you've left corporate thinking you have the freedom to thrive and instead have found yourself overwhelmed, scattered, and wondering what the hell happened to the high performer you used to be, this episode is going to feel like someone finally turned the lights on. I'm Deb Boulanger, and this is Life After Corporate. Today, I'm sitting down with Mineela Chand, a leadership consultant and coach who works at the intersection of neuroscience and executive function, helping high achievers stop blaming themselves and start building the kind of structure that makes success actually repeatable. Here's what we're getting into today, and we're going to talk about your corporate identity when you first make the leap from corporate to entrepreneurship and what happens when entrepreneurship strips all of that away. And uh, when you have already launched your business and the world changes on you and you suddenly don't know who you are, what your value is any longer. So stick around. There's some great gems to be dropped here and a wonderful gift that Manila is going to share with you as well. So welcome to Life After Corporate, Manila Chan.
Hi, Deb. I've been looking forward to this.
So let's talk about this life after corporate journey. And I know we were chatting before we hit record
Mm,
that you had a short stint in corporate, but would love to have our listeners learn more about why you chose the path that you're on. What was that moment when you realized that corporate life is not for me and you chose another path instead?
mhm. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't say that corporate life is not for me. I've just
Okay.
decided to be in corporate life on my own terms. Um, yeah.
Okay.
So, after graduation in undergrad, so I have a BSc, which is a research-based undergrad in psychology. And, I landed, and this was in, like, the mid-90s, so that was when we had that recession where kids were graduating and no jobs and all of that, so I did a lot of,
Right.
temporary work, and I was, like, in and out of all kinds of organizations doing all kinds of interesting things and learned a lot about corporate, small business, because I was that receptionist up at front who, filled in for somebody who didn't show up or was sick or on vacation or something. And in between phone calls and long stretches of silence, I would be reading corporate, reports and annual reports. And this was before internet, so I couldn't do any searches, but I grabbed whatever was kind of, there. So I was reading all kinds of
Mhm.
corporate materials and things like that. So and I'm also a people watcher, so I watched a lot of these things kind of happening in terms of relationships, in organizations, how people functioned, how leaders, got people invested in doing the things that needed to be done, and eventually I landed in a full-time role in a, consulting position. So I was in a consulting position. They actually got acquired by Deloitte& and Touche, many
Wow.
years ago, and, they focused on soft skills training. So at that time in the '90s, soft skills training was kind of seen as the stepchild of corporate training. It was considered a soft skill and, so spent a year there, and that's where my love for organizations and leadership and people, relationships, and psychology kind of collided. So, yeah, so my leader after a year, she was lovely. My first day with her was somebody dropped Kleenex on my desk and said, "Good luck." And I thought, "Oh, great. What am I in for?" And then the last day, she was pretty much, "You're too smart for what it is that you're doing. Either you let me mentor you into something much bigger, or you go into the world and do what it is that you're supposed to be doing because you're in the wrong place." So I went back to
Wow.
grad school, became a therapist, and even though I became a therapist, I've always had my fingers in the corporate world. So my clientele were always professionals. I did a stint on site at Johnson and Johnson as an EAP consultant. So I did far more than what EAP usually is. I ended up being the go-to person for leadership training, soft skills. I was doing like at least 2 or 3 trainings a year for senior leadership. And I was also called to the table for senior leadership change management meetings, with the instruction to, can you please keep your ears open, Manila, for anything that we're not thinking of in terms of from a people perspective and taking care of our people during change management situations. So, and now I've kind of made that shift from being a therapist to
Mm.
going full on into coaching leaders, entrepreneurs, founders, specifically around how their brain functions. And because I have this varied experience, I can kind of pull on all kinds of things. And I think one of the best compliments that anybody has ever given me is you think about things from all kinds of different perspectives. So spiritual, emotional, business perspective, from a cognitive perspective, whatever's happening with you physically. So I kind of take all of those things together and work with people in that way.
Yeah.
So,
And people kind of tend to compartmentalize themselves, with, this is my business, this is my family, but
mhm,
when especially entrepreneurship, I find kicks up all your stuff because you have to bring all of you to the table. And I believe, entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey. It will test you. It
mm,
will give you the opportunity to grow in ways that you've never imagined growing. But when I talk to women who are I've had several conversations in the
mm,
last week that I'd love to chat with you about because the women who are listening to this podcast will probably hear themselves in some of these descriptions. About 1 in 4 of women who are leaving corporate are choosing entrepreneurship right
mm,
now. Uh, and they're choosing it because they're not sure they want to get another job, especially if they were let go. They're like, I may have aged out of this, or in this economy, good jobs are really hard to come by. But they're hedging their bets. It's like, well, I'm looking for a full-time job because that's what feels safer to me right now. And at the same time, I'm exploring what it would look like if I launched a consulting business.
mhm,
And I always, and I get it. I get that corporate feels safer and they're going for safety and assuredness and security, even when it's not so safe or secure. Um, but also there's a lot of fear around that. So, and let's talk a little bit about the early decision to even decide that you want to go out on your own.
mhm. That's a really big conversation, and I think where I would start with that is to say that right now we live in a time where everything is very uncertain and everything feels
Mhm.
unsafe, right? Like jobs feel unsafe,
Mhm.
businesses feel unsafe, for women, especially in terms of security and safety, right? Things that are
Mhm.
predictable to know that we're able to, kind of meet our needs and meet the needs of our children and our families, and a lot of us are kind of in this place where we're not only we might be single, but we're also taking care of children, and we're also caretaking for older our elders, right? Who are aging. So everything feels uncertain, um, and that's a valid thing. Like I would never
Mhm.
say, that doesn't make any sense, or, you're crazy for feeling like that, because it does make a whole heck of a lot of sense if you look at
Yeah.
what the bigger picture is, right? And how women are socially positioned as well as politically positioned right now, in terms of, losing rights and equity and all of those types of conversations. So when I talk to people about uncertainty and ambiguity, right, one of the things that I help them to fall back on is, what can you trust? What can you fall back on? What is certain for you? And the shift that I like to make with them is, you can trust yourself, right?
Mhm.
If you know who you
Yeah.
are, if you know what you are capable of, what you are capable of learning, and what you are capable of doing, that is something that you can be extremely, extremely certain of. So regardless of whether you're in a unstable work environment or an unstable business environment, it's not about trusting the business or the organization. It's about falling into that place where you trust who it is that you are and what you know that you can do. So it all falls back to, the identity piece that you and I both, kind of talk a
Yeah.
lot about, right? So when you can't trust things, who can you trust? and trust that you have everything that you need to be able to figure out whatever needs to be figured out, right?
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
love that positioning, yeah. And it is true, and I think trust and faith is the biggest lesson that I've learned
Yeah.
as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, that, I can figure it out, that my needs are always taken care
Mhm.
of, but these irrational fears come out when we lose the scaffolding, right? So
Mm,
we lose the title, we lose the team, we lose the brand, we lose our reputation inside of the institution, and for those who make the decision that I am going to trust myself and risk this, there's still this underlying fear and anxiety about who am I now? And uh, the decision making gets harder. They tend to spin and delay and not invest in help or support. It's this almost what I would call a trauma response. Like it's not safe to ask for help
mhm,
because that gets conditioned out of us in corporate.
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
what do you see when you work with women who are making this transition? How do they regain that faith in who they are at this new identity?
Right. I think I think the biggest piece to understand, like in terms of the scaffolding, right? Like you just described a whole bunch of things in terms of how an organization scaffolds our identity, right? It tells us what performance looks like, what we're worth, right? Based on our salary, what they're going to pay us, how
Mhm.
much bonus we get, all of that kind of stuff, right? What we're worth. Um, it tells us, and the interesting thing is it tells us how we perform well based on someone else's criteria, right? Not on our own criteria, but on somebody else's criteria. And they tell us, well, your performance is good if you meet these particular criteria, but they don't tell you what it is about you that actually makes it possible for you to meet those criteria, right? So, so there's a lot of things that corporate defines for us and defines for us as individuals, both men and women, but women in general, because we're kind of socialized to look for validation and outside validation. Um, but it tells us who we are, but that is not a complete picture of who it is that we are, right? And we're never given an opportunity. I mean, who teaches us? Who teaches us about learning yourself and being a good student of yourself and being a good scientist of yourself, right? What we do is we take on the identities that people kind of throw on top of us. So when all of that is pulled away after you leave from corporate, you no longer can, I have a lot of women who are kind of like, I can't say that I'm the director of such and such 500 Fortune company or 50 Fortune, company anymore because that used to open doors for me. I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to say that I was in C suite at this organization and there were a lot of assumptions that were made and that would open doors for me. Now I don't have that to fall back on. So when you have that identity, which was conferred on you by someone else pulled away, there's nothing to fall back on because nobody has ever taught us how to define our own identity and who it is that we are. So the work then becomes figuring out who you are, right? Figuring out who you are and what are the pieces that organization gave you that you can take with you because you're not starting from scratch, right? You're not starting
Right.
from scratch. There are things that are generalizable that you can take. So we actually do an inventory of, well, what did your performance reviews say? What did they say you were good at? Let's pull that apart and let's look at that. You're good at relationships, you're good at networking, you're good at stakeholder management, you're good at strategy, you're good at this. Now, if you see those as skills that are only within a particular area of work, like we were you and I were talking about compartmentalizing, right? If you say these skills belong in these compartments, right, it becomes really confusing because when I'm not no longer in that compartment, what does it mean about those skills? So the work then becomes taking those skills and looking at them in a way that they scale and generalize to your not just to your business, but to your relationships and to your parenting and the way you show up as a partner and how you do things in your life. So being somebody who is very strategic in an organization, well, that's a skill that works itself out in planning your toddler's first birthday party, right? Like that is the same
Yeah.
strategic skill. That is the same strategic skill in terms of, as a woman, I want to propose to my partner and my fiance, and how am I going to make that happen? Right. Or this is the kind of children that I want to raise, and how do I strategically position my parenting so that I can accomplish that goal and
Yeah.
people develop my children so that they become the kinds of people that, you know, society will value, and that my children can become independent in their lives without me, right? So it's
Yes.
removing the compartmentalization, taking those skills and generalizing them, that you can take them anywhere. You can take them anywhere,
Yeah.
right?
And also, I think, you're more than your
You
skills.
are. You're so much
Right?
more.
So
Yeah.
right? And so I see some people, and I was guilty of this too. I was so burnt out when I left my corporate position that I wanted to focus on something completely new. I didn't want to take my old skills with me. So I had a new certification. I was a certified holistic health coach, and so I focused everything on that new credential, and it wasn't until like 3 years later and my son went to college, I'm sitting at the kitchen table saying, "Well, what now?"
That's right.
And it's like,
Mhm.
"Well, what am I observing?" I'm observing women who have a lot of talent, and a lot of skills, and don't know how to launch their business. And I'm a launch professional. I mean, it was my job to launch services into the market. I've been in sales, I've been in marketing. I can help those people. But also it's who you are.
Mhm.
It's your values. So when we approach it, it's like bring all of you to the
Yeah.
table,
Yeah.
your corporate skills, what you're passionate about, what breaks your heart, what pisses you off, the
Mhm.
experiences from childhood, right? I'm sure you get
Yeah.
into heavy duty
Yeah.
experiences from childhood,
Yeah.
money stories, all of that. But let's bring it all to the
Yeah.
table.
Your energy
And
levels, how your body works,
yeah,
what you can tolerate, what you can't. I mean, there are a lot of things that if you think about it, an organization actually tells you to leave at the door, right? Like, because
right.
sometimes there are things in an organization where you're kind of like, if this was my own business, I wouldn't do it that way because this concerns me and this concerns me and this concerns me. And sometimes in an organization, you're trying to figure out, how can I do this and deliver this, but also stay consistent with my values and who I am so that I can fully stand behind it, right? Um, and then when you're in a business, it's kind of like, you know what? This would work. One of the big things that challenges that I see, and I've kind of been in this place, right? It's like, you know what? If I didn't have any values and if I didn't have any morals, I'd be making a whole heck of a lot of money. Like, I
Yeah.
would
Yeah,
be
yeah, right.
making a whole heck of a lot more money than I do if it didn't matter to me, how I positioned myself. If I didn't worry about, you know, ADHDers and what kind of breaks down their executive functions and their inability to make good decisions so that they will spend their money and then not think about it, right? And then regret it later,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
would be making a lot of money if I could take all of those psychological things and um put them into my marketing, but would I be able to live with that? No, because I need my business to be consistent with how my energy works, what my values are, what I want to give, what kind of emotional and moral legacy do I want to leave for my daughter, right? Like after I'm
Mhm.
gone, like how do I want people who I've worked with to talk to my daughter about the kind of woman that I was and how I showed up in business and what I was willing to do well, and what I said absolutely no, because this is not consistent, even if that means leaving a lot of money on the table, right?
Yeah. You've just described perfectly like square one for making this identity shift from corporate to entrepreneurship, which is who am I now,
Mhm.
without the scaffolding. And you don't get to skip over that step because it will catch up with you eventually. Um, let's talk about fear because that's the primary refrain that I'm hearing in most of the
Mm,
conversations today. And it comes from 2 places. It's the, future picturing that I'm gonna run out of money, or, I have to really be careful about what I spend because it's going to run out eventually. Or there's also the women entrepreneurs who are several years into this, and they were making money and the market shifted on them, specifically those women who were hired as DEI consultants, but also those who, uh, yeah, mostly in the DEI
mm,
space, say those that were working for equality and belonging and women's rights are struggling mightily right now. And there is a lot of fear, and when fear takes over, strategy takes a back seat, right? Brene Brown has a great quote about that I'm not going to remember right now. But how do you work with your clients when the fear is really getting in the way of effective decision making?
mm, yeah. So, um, I could talk about this from my own perspective too. Like, I mean, fear is something that I don't think any one of us can escape, right? Like, there's no cure for fear because fear is kind of hardwired into us. We're always looking for what is the dangerous thing, what is the fearful thing, but there's a difference between what is imminently dangerous and what we have interpreted as being dangerous, right? And when it comes to fear, fear also collapses time, right? So things that are fearful that might be in the future that we could plan for, we don't plan for because it feels like it's in the present, right? And I'm frozen right now. So I think the first step for fear has always been for me and for my clients, like to look at the fear directly. Like, what are the
Hmm.
concerns here? What are the concerns here? Let's look at the worst case scenario. If that worst case scenario happened, what would you be doing? Right. I think the power of fear lies in the fact that it recruits us into believing that we can be safe by not looking at it. Right. That there's some kind of safety in not looking at it fully and like taking a full frontal view of it. Um, And often when we look at it more directly, it loses its power because then we can start kind of, pulling it apart, like what's real here and what's not real here. Because until you actually know what the enemy is, you can't do anything about it. And the enemy has more power if you don't look at it fully, because what we imagine in our mind, because if there's a gap in our understanding of reality and what the facts are, what does our brain do? It injects into that gap our biggest fear, our biggest worry, our biggest wound, right? And our biggest fears come out of our biggest wounds. So I would say the first step is to actually look at the fear and say, you know what? What is something here to be fearful about? What
Yeah.
is just out of my own imagination? What's imminent and what can I plan for? Right?
Yeah.
Because you can't make a plan until you know like what the territory actually looks like. Right?
Well, yeah, and fear and creativity can't exist in the
No,
same mind at the same
no, it
time.
can't.
Right, so fear is
Yeah.
paralyzing, and that's why I'm a huge fan of the work of Byron
Hmm.
Katie, which is the simple question, "Is it
Right.
true?" Right? So, really looking at the fear, questioning the fear, um, and on the other side, fear can be a great motivator. And I'll give an example. So we talked before we hit record. I was a single mom, just gotten divorced, primary wage earner in the family. So here I am making the risky move by most
Hmm.
standards of leaving a high paying, steady corporate job. It was my choice. I wasn't let go. And I wouldn't have been let go. Um, but my values of wanting to be a mom for my son who was 12 years old, going into that really tricky time in middle school and high school, and wanting to prioritize my family. So the fear that was a motivator was, 1, I have a lifestyle to maintain. 2, I also felt this responsibility to the other women that I left behind because when you do succeed at the level that I succeeded at, everybody's watching and they want to know how you did
Mhm.
it, how you got there. And the younger women leaders in the company would sit across from me and say, "What do I need to do? How do I get a seat at that table?" So I also felt this responsibility to others to prove to them that there was a different path that they could follow, that they didn't have to sacrifice their values, their lifestyle, their families, for the paycheck.
Mhm.
So, I think fear can be motivating too.
Yeah, and I'm just like making a quick note here because I wanted to because I put down a couple of words that you used, right? Like words are really really important to me because I think they, you know, they kind of clarify things. But I think when we talk about fear, we talk about fear as this big nebulous kind of thing, right? But what you talked about was urgency, right? Responsibility, and there was an underlying sense of accountability as well. Like I'm accountable to my children, right? As a mother, I'm accountable to meeting the needs of my children, responsibility to the women that I've left, um, and a sense of urgency. Like this is urgency based, right? When that's not fear, those things are not
Mm,
fear, right? So
right.
if we use the word fear, our body responds, our body and our mind and the rest of our emotions responds to fear as danger, 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 right? But when you think about what you said in terms of urgency, responsibility, accountability, I don't know about you, but when I think about those words, something shifts in my body. Something
Yeah.
settles, something softens, right? There isn't that sense of danger, right? But I can do something with urgency, right? Urgency means
Yeah.
I have time and I need to move quickly on this. Responsibility means I have there are certain expectations that I have of myself to be a certain thing to other people, I can create a plan around that. How can I be responsible in this thing that I'm moving forward in? And I need to be accountable, right? I need to be accountable in the sense that I need to be doing something, making enough so that I can put a roof over my children's heads, I can give them clothes, I can send them to school, and I can have nice things in my life, right?
Mhm.
So those are very different than fear. So when you're
Mhm.
talking about fear, it's this nebulous thing that shuts us down. But is there something in the fear that's not really about fear that can loosen things up a little bit and can help us with the momentum to move forward? Because it's not always about fear,
Yes, I love
right?
that. And I've done a lot of internal work, a lot of therapy, a lot of coaching, and a lot of spiritual work to be able to objectify fear,
Mhm,
and hold it out
mhm,
and
mhm,
and look at it.
yeah,
I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the other you deal with 12 different aspects of executive
mhm,
function, and would love to hear some of the other challenges that you're seeing your clients go through and how you've helped them reframe those
mhm.
by understanding, how executive function
Yeah.
works.
So executive functions are the cognitive abilities that allow us to um, create a plan, right? And follow through and execute on a plan, on any goal. Okay. So I don't care if there's a commercial break coming and I need to figure out how to go to the kitchen, get a snack, and come back within that commercial break without being distracted by anything else that needs to be done in the house. Okay. It could be as simple as
Mhm,
that. Or it could be, I want to make $1 million this year, which means, I need to do certain things and let's put a plan together. So when now everybody has strengths and challenges in all of these executive functions. So we're talking about things like working memory, planning, prioritization, organization, problem solving. So all of these things when you put together, they're like Lego blocks, right? And if you have all of the Lego blocks, you can only build certain things with certain Lego blocks. And if you don't have certain Lego blocks, you got to figure out how to get those Lego blocks so that you can build what it is that you want. But here's the thing with every Lego set, right? What is the most valuable piece in a Lego set, right? It's that green piece, that base, right? That you
Mhm.
build
The
all
foundation.
of that stuff on, right? It's the foundation.
Mhm.
So if I were to say, if you want to work on anything as far as executive functions are concerned, right? What is the foundation? The foundation, emotional management, right? Emotional management is the thing that will help you keep all of these other cognitive abilities online, because once you lose that, your brain is going to go into panic mode, into fear mode, and say, you know what? I am focused right now on survival, which means I am going to hoard all of the energy from all of the other things that you are capable of doing into survival. So you can't problem solve. You can't use your working memory. You can't do planning, prioritization, organization, and all of these other lovely things. You can't inhibit your responses. You become impulsive. You become emotional. You become da 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 da. All of those things, right? And then we come out of it and we're like, oh crap, what did I do? Right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it
self-sabotage,
is.
really.
It is. So if I were to say you need the foundation, let's find that green nice platform, the Lego piece that every kid fights over, right? Like I remember, like I've got two younger sisters and we used to fight over that piece because if you had that piece, you could build anything, right? It
Mhm.
would be emotional management. And emotional management includes things like, how do I change my emotional state? Having those skills and knowing how to do that. And how do I change my identity and how I think about myself and what I think about myself? Because when those two things you're able to do and you're able to shift the thinking, and there's so many different ways of doing that and getting your identity stable, everything else becomes so much easier.
So true. I often tell people that entrepreneurship is like cracking your heart open 1 inch at a time, and you'll learn to see yourself through the reflection
Mhm.
of other people. And what you're going to see, if you're open to it, is a more expansive human than you have ever allowed yourself to think about
Yeah,
yourself before.
yeah.
Because we're all so much bigger and capable of so much more than corporate allowed
Mhm.
us to be.
Mhm.
Right. So it was fitting into a very tight little
Right.
box. And now there's a whole blank
Right.
canvas.
Right.
But that also is very triggering. So I think the foundation of that emotional regulation and learning, it's almost moving from head to heart, really, which I do a lot of work on, is, listening more to the second brain,
Mhm.
that is the one that's in your heart,
Mhm.
and less about the chatter,
Right.
which is mostly not serving you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. I think so, 2 things around that. The first thing that I was thinking was the analogy that I use for my business, right, is it's a crucible, right? For me, it's a crucible in the sense that, if you don't know what a crucible is, it's a vessel that's used by jewelers, right? So that they put the gold into the vessel and then they fire it. Okay. To purify out all of the impure, like to burn out all of the impurities from the gold so that what is left after put the gold into the crucible is simply the gold, right? So you burn away all of the
Mhm.
dross, all of the stuff that doesn't belong in there. And I kind of see people like that, right? Like you are at your core y- who you are supposed to be, and everything about you is perfect and it's wonderful and it's lovable and it's enough and it's more than enough, right? You bring to the world something that people are hungry for. Somebody out there is waiting for you to launch your business because they're waiting for the solution that only you can provide. Like they are hungry for this.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, and the world is such that it will take your goldness, your purityness, your good enoughness, your better than good enoughness, and all of your gifts and everything, and start packing stuff on top of you. This is who you are. This is who you are. This is who you are. And part of the work of the crucible, right, is to burn all of that off and chip that off so you can get at the core of who it is that you are. And I would really argue that we know who it is that we are. We're just afraid of what it would mean to really, really embrace that.
I think that was golden, and I think that is even a good enough message to leave the listeners
Mhm,
with today is that, you're so much bigger, you're so much greater than you can allow yourself to see or feel right now,
mhm.
and the gift of this journey is to finally become who you always have been. And so it's not a journey of becoming, it's really a journey of, like, shedding, what
Yeah,
you said
it's
in the
it's
crucible, letting
it's
go of.
remembering, who you are, right? Like, it's an uncovering of who it is that you are. You're not, you're not becoming something, you're just returning
Right.
to who you already are.
The original
Yeah,
blueprint. Yeah,
yeah, before the world
absolutely.
got their hands on you.
Yeah.
Mm,
Mineela, thank you so much. This, even though we could have
mm,
talked for another hour about all of this,
yeah,
but I think we hit on the foundation and we hit on fear. And the gift is trusting yourself enough to move through the fear so that you can get to the gold.
mm,
And my friends, if this spoke to you today, if you saw a bigger vision for yourself, if you saw a better path forward, um, get in touch with Manila. She is a gift to this world. So grateful for you. It's like, we'll do more together, because there's so much richness in the work that you're doing.
mhm,
You are exceptionally smart. You are exceptionally perceptive. And women need you. They need us. They
mhm,
need women like us
mhm.
who can carry them forward so that they don't, get lost in the conditioning.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Amazing, my friend. How do people get in touch with you? You mentioned a gift,
Yep.
that you're
I
gonna
first,
be sharing that you'll put in show
I
notes.
just want to say thank you. I'm excited about whatever more might come out of this. As far as how you can find me, oh, let me talk about the gift first. So when I was thinking about being on the podcast, I was like, what can I give? What can I give Deb and the women that she works with and everything? Because as a therapist, I have a lot of skills in terms of how to shift identity and things like that. So I put a workbook together for you and all of your people. So it's a
Mm.
workbook, a journal that actually looks at what is the identities, what are the identities that corporate actually gave you that you need to reconfigure, look at more clearly, because often these identities we take on without examining them, right? They're unexamined, and sometimes we don't even know how to, describe them because they haven't been defined. So that's what the journal is about. It's a journal kind of education piece, things for you to think about in terms of bringing those unspoken things and unlanguaged things forward so that you can language them, because unless you have language for something, you can't create new language around it. So that's something that I will make sure, Deb, that you have so that you can give to. And where can you find me? I am all over LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn at Mineela Chand. And you can also find me on my website, mineelachand.com. And I am on a hiatus right now for my podcast, which is ADHD Running in Heels. Um, but yeah, that's going to be starting up soon as well. So look forward to seeing you in any of those places. Reach out. I am happy to connect.
I love that. Thank you so much, Manila. It's been such a rich conversation. And that's it for this episode, my friend. Listen twice. It was worth it. And share it with someone else. And if you loved what you learned today, please leave us a rating or review. It helps other people discover our show. Share it with someone you love. We'll see you next week. Take care.